Hello, friends. So glad to be with you all today. I like to start these meetings by just inviting everyone to click on gallery view in the top right corner. And if you feel comfortable turning your camera on, so we can just take a moment to see who's here. It is my belief that one of the most important and valuable things that Soto Zen Buddhist Association offers is the ability to make personal connections and deepen personal connections. So even though this may seem like a brief moment, it matters just to see the faces of our beloved friends in practice. Um, and if you're like me at this moment, you're wishing you could, it's like, oh, I would love to talk to 20 of these people. But we can just see our faces and have a moment. So I'm really grateful that you're here for this workshop. And for your support of this work to build a more safe and healthy and ethical culture in Soto Zen Buddhism. And I just want to point out before I turn this over to our moderator that we set these workshops up or these gatherings as a part of a process where the board hopes to adopt, with the support of the membership, a new ethics policy in the fall. And we really need people to be engaged, both thinking about the issues and supporting the work, because it's challenging to adopt a major new policy. So we're hoping that you'll stay with this work and that we'll come out at the end of the year with a much stronger basis for protecting people and for having healthy communities. So thank you for being here, and I'm going to introduce our moderator and co-presenter for today, Tenku Ruff. Tenku Ruff served on the SCBA Board of Directors for 6 years, was the SCBA Board President from 2017 to 2020, currently serves as chair of the SCBA Ethics Committee. In her work as a board-certified chaplain, Tenku undertook significant training in medical ethics and has served on the ethics committees of several hospitals, including NYU Langone Medical Center, Northwell Health Phelps Hospital, where she was director of spiritual services. In addition to her experience in medical ethics, Tenku made Buddhist ethics the focus of the Master's of Divinity degree she earned in 2014. She became a certified instructor in the right use of power in 2016 and brought the right use of power training to SCBA members at the 2016, 2018, and 2020 conferences. And I was there and they were great. Tenku trained extensively in Soto Zen monasteries in Japan and North America under the direction of Tessai Yamamoto Roshi, abbot of Kanonji Temple in Morioka, Japan, and received Dharma transmission in the same lineage in 2010. She currently serves as head priest of Beacon Zen Temple in Beacon, New York. Tenku planned and organized this lecture series in response to SCBA member questions, concerns, and calls for discussion about ethics. Thanks so much for all you've been doing on this. And Tenku, I turn it to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy to share this time with you and especially to share the right use of power training from an ethics perspective with you. Many of you are aware of the right use of power through different SCBA initiatives, as Ben mentioned, at the different conferences 2016, 2018, and 2020. And some of you have done the training yourself. But today, I'm really excited to introduce to you the founder of the Right Use of Power Institute, Dr. Cedar Barstow. Cedar has designed, developed, and been teaching this approach to working with power since 1994. She lives in Boulder, Colorado, where she's a teacher and consultant, and she's also a Hakomi therapist. She wrote the book on the right use of power, The Right Use of Power, the Heart of Ethics. And she leads the different training programs that you might have come across. So if you have not yet had the chance to work with Cedar, then this is a really wonderful opportunity. You're going to find her style very warm and engaging and interactive. So please listen and pay attention. And if you have questions, you have a master in front of you. So go ahead and bring your questions. You can put them in the chat as you have them, and I'll be serving as moderator. in addition to some co-presentation during this time. So Cedar, thank you so much for offering us your time once again and your wisdom. And we really look forward to learning from you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tenku. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Ben. I'm very happy to be here. I want to tell you how delighted I am to be co-presenting with Tenku. And in addition, I don't know, I guess you've met a number of people who are gathered together under Tenku as the leader to put together your proposed grievance process and code of ethics, which I must say, thanks to Tenku and this wonderful committee, is one of the best I've ever seen. It's really thorough, and it's clear, and it's human. So thank you so much for bringing all this work together. Your leadership has been exemplary and powerful and productive. Okay, so taking a breath. Today, we are going to be focusing on responding to 5 different issues, concerns, questions that have come up out of your process about looking at this code of ethics. And I want to read them to you, and then we will take them one by one. So the first one we're going to attend to is opinions about what is or is not ethics. And those making this assertion seem to do so authoritatively and may not have any formal training in ethics. Second is Zen priests should be able to make their own decisions about dating or marrying their students or having their spouse as a student. The third is opinions that people should not question or hold accountable those with Dharma transmission, especially not lay people and novice priests. The fourth is a belief that cases in which teachers' own board would be blind or unable to see the teacher's unethical behavior are very rare. Now, these are all concerns and thoughts. And number 5 is that documents should be very simple with lots of room for flexibility of interpretation. Now, these are concerns that have come from you that we really want to respond to. But also in our hour and a half together, I want to help humanize ethics, because it's often seen as something that's hard to approach. And I want to also humanize all of our ability, the fact that all of us make mistakes, and that's not the end of the line. Making mistakes is something we all do. Causing harm is something we all do. Relationships are messy. So I want to do those 2 things. And we will also, I'll tell you Anna already told you we're going to do an experiential piece that will be about 10 minutes. Okay, ready to go? So let's first take a little look at the first issue about what is or actually is not ethics. I want to give you several definitions, but the simplest one is ethics is really about being in right relationship. So just curious, if you hear the word ethics, what comes up? Put it in the chat. What do you know? What's related for you to just the word ethics? Somebody tells you, we're going to talk about ethics, or Somebody has an ethics complaint against you. What comes up? Taking care of vulnerable people. Oh, lots of things. Let's see. A moral code, discipline and responsibility, values, what matters, right action, integrity, morality, integrity, moral and considerate behavior, and so on. Yes, yes. So you can see there's a wide range between kind of choking up and feeling like this is really about relationship and integrity. So I appreciate that a lot. I want to give you a couple of definitions of ethics that I found. Here's one from Brother David Stendel-Rast, and I'm quoting him. Ethics is how we behave when we decide we belong together. I love that one. It's simple. It's about relationship. It's about right relationship. And it actually turned into the title of this workshop. Ethics is how we behave when we decide we belong together. We decide we belong together, then we want everyone to feel supported. Another definition is ethics is a set of values, attitudes, and skills. That's values, attitudes, and skills intended to have benevolent effects when applied through behavioral guidelines, decision-making processes, and the practice of compassion. And I like that combination of always with compassion as the foundation and using decision-making processes, which could mean consulting with somebody else, consulting with a supervisor, consulting with another kind of expert when you get into a situation that you don't know what to do about. We all get into situations we don't know what's right to do for everyone. So in my figuring out about designing and creating right use of power some 30 years ago as a psychotherapist, I discovered that the power differential is actually what makes a code of ethics and ethics itself important and needed. And the power differential, I know a number of you know what this is, but just to say it again, the power differential is the difference in power when someone has what we call role power added to their personal power. And role power has responsibilities, and the power differential is there because there's value to it for both teacher, student, psychotherapist, client. There is value in this relationship, but it does create a power difference. And in right use of power terminology, not because because it's better or worse or right or wrong, but just for ease of talking about it, is the person with the role power in addition to their personal power is called up power, and the person just arriving with their personal power, which is plenty of power, is in the down power position. So we're going to be using that terminology. And I also want to give you a little background, and again, this is probably review for a lot of you, about 5 types of power that we talk about. And Anna is going to put into the chat a handout, which you can download later, but we won't show it on the screen now because it has way more information than I'm going to say right now. I just want to do the most simple descriptions of the 5 types. So the core type, and you can see these as nested together, like in those, I guess it's from China, those little nested dolls. they take one out and then the next one is in. Well, personal power is the core, it's the foundation. Your personal power is your birthright power. Everyone is born with power, and the ability, power is defined as the ability to have an effect or to have influence. I'm going to say that again. Power in our working definition is the ability to have an effect or to have influence. It's neutral, in other words. It's how we use it that makes it harmful or helpful. It's how we use it that makes it harmful or helpful. And that's with all the types of power. So personal power is one of those. Using our power, and we all need to have our power, using it, we can use it for good, or we can use it in a way that's unconscious or uneducated, uninformed, and causes harm. Now, if you think about personal power, you think about a baby and how much influence a baby has when it cries. And the other kind of influence a baby has when it smiles. That's babies. Think of what we can do as educated, wise, conscious, self-aware adults. Okay, the next kind of power, type of power that we talk about is role power. And I just talked about that a little bit. And so any of you who are teachers or priests in the Buddhist system, the Zen Buddhist system, have something called role power. Those of you who are on the board of directors of your centers have role power. This is an extra added power. And I think of it as like, for me as a psychotherapist, like putting on a scarf. A lot of you, like I see Tenku and others of you have a scarf and have robes to distinguish when you're in your role power. And this is really important because one of the biggest causes of misuses of power is when we blend our personal power with our role power. Instead of thinking of it as something you consciously take off and put on at the appropriate time, and it gives you added power that's not you, but embedded in your role. So the next person who's wearing that scarf has the same responsibilities you just had. And it's so easy. Let me tell you, I know it's so easy to get those blended together and think that you are even more than to think that your role power is your personal power. Does that make sense? Nod if it makes sense. And then there's a complication of status power, which is culturally assigned, and not even just or fair or righteous, but culturally assigned. It's the extra power that you have if you are, well, in American culture, if you are a white male, for example, and even cisgendered. So those are culturally assigned and not right and fair, and cause a great deal of harm and tension. And we're not going to talk about that more today, but it would be not right of me to not mention how entwined status power and how complex it makes all these situations. Then there is collective power, which is the kind of power we have when we gather together to try to change something or do something important together. It's a collective power. And again, like all the powers can be used for ill, or for good. And then the next kind that we talk about is systemic power. Now, systemic power overarches all of these others because in so many ways it filters down to every layer. And systemic power is the kind of power that is part of laws and how systems work, and is created by the people who run the systems to begin with. So it can be unfair and unjust, or it can be fair and just. We're adding another kind, which is nature power, universal power. We're not sure what to call it. Let me know if you have an idea, but that's the power of the earth and its resilience and its fragility and our need to connect and engage with the earth. Okay, 5 types of power: personal, role, status, collective, systemic, universal. And I think of spiritual power as being partly in the universal, something beyond us, and partly in your personal power. Okay. Now, role power and the power differential makes things very much more complex. And the dynamics connected with it are something we really need to learn. It's not something you automatically know. I went to a class once and several people came to the course with books, letters they were going to write, envelopes, and I asked one of them, what are these books and letters you're going to write? And this person said to me, well, you know, I don't need this class because I have good intentions. Well, yes, good intentions are extremely important and necessary, but they're not enough when you're navigating this complex territory of the dynamics of the power differential. So now is the time that I want to do an experiential exercise with you to give you a chance to feel both sides of the power differential. And it's important to do that in order to keep open our sensitivity to what it's like to be up power and what it's like to be down power. So it's an imagination exercise. And as Anna said, you can put a little hash mark in front of your name if you don't want to, but want to be in a special self-reflecting room on your own. So I am going to, while Anna is arranging these groups, and you will, after the reflection that I take you through, you'll go into the groups for 10 minutes to talk together about what your experience was. Okay, so take a minute to get comfortable in your chair. Take a breath, settle into yourselves. I know you know how to do that very well. And then I recommend you turning off your screen or closing your eyes, but it's okay to leave them open if you want, but just find a way to pay attention to your own experience. Okay, so first I want you to feel into and imagine yourself as a Zen teacher. And even if you are a student and not a teacher, I want you to imagine yourself as your teacher. So as you settle into that, Notice what happens in your posture. Do you sit up taller or lean back, or what is your posture like? And please notice how you experience your personal power and your added on role power. How do you experience this in your body? Is it a feeling of strength or caution, or then please notice, where is your attention? Is it on some big space, or on your student, or on yourself, or where is your attention? Notice, what is your goal? What is your desire for your student? Notice if you want to give away your power, or if you want to hold it too much, underuse or overuse it, your role power. So for a minute now, just keep gathering information about yourself as a teacher, in truth or in your imagination. And now, please let go of that role and maybe move around in your chair a little bit, stretch. Let go of that. Find your neutral space again. Take a breath. And this time, please imagine yourself as a student of a Zen teacher, so that you could imagine yourself as a student of yourself as a teacher, or imagine a student of your teacher. And notice your posture here. Is it in any way different from your posture as a student? Notice where your attention is as a student. Notice how you feel toward this teacher. Notice if you have special expectations of this teacher. Notice how you want to be treated by this teacher. And also, please notice, are there any ways that you are aware of that you don't want the teacher to treat you? Ways that could cause you harm or hurt. And please notice how it is to be here just with your personal power. No extra added on role. in a power differential relationship that's designed to support you and help you get what you need out of this relationship. And gathering that information. When you're ready, bring your attention back here, shake that position off, and find your student in this class self. Okay, so now is the time, Anna, that you can put people into groups. You will be there for 10 minutes, and please use the time to just share about what your experience and learnings were or surprises. Okay. One other important distinction. We can cause harm, we can cause hurt, there can be a misunderstanding, and one person may have something happen that feels like a simple misunderstanding. And the same thing could have happened to another student, and they might feel, oh, that hurts. The same thing could happen to a third student, and they might feel, that harmed me. So little and big mistakes can be experienced by different students at different levels of hurt or harm or simple misunderstanding. Does that make sense? It's a distinction we don't often talk about. Okay, so I want to go back to our first issue, the one about opinions about what is or is not ethics. And I want to ask Tenku if you would put into words so we can all hear it, what it seems to you that Zen practitioners, how they orient around ethics, or many. We won't ever say all. Many or some.
Yeah. We had a few opinions about what is and what is not ethics, both made with a certain authority, which again, we go back into that role power, sort of conflated with spiritual power, and also made not necessarily by people with formal training in ethics. And one of the things people thought was that maybe this was people getting too black and white. You know, that ethics is as rules that are really black and white. For those of you who were here for Carol Murchison's presentation, you might remember that she talks about the law as the base of the triangle and the precepts as further up on the triangle, and our policies as being in the middle. So our policies in the middle of this triangle represent our relationships with each other. So where I think we might be, and I'd be curious as to what people here think about that, is rather than in Zen, us thinking of ethics as a set of rules, a very black and white thing, many SCBA members might think of ethics as guidelines that may or may not be followed. So it gives a lot of agency to whether we follow them or not, according to the needs of the moment. So it sort of leaves out the rules aspect of it and goes way up into the top of the pyramid, maybe even floating off of the pyramid altogether. And so in this way of thinking, a downside or fallacy of this is that the person who's holding the power in the relationship decides what is and what is not appropriate. So, in other words, when people have an idea that the process of becoming a Zen teacher automatically gives you the ability to discern what is or what is not ethics, sort of those esoteric qualities I was talking about a minute ago, then this can leave out the relationship and the concrete aspects of ethics. You know, the black and white rules, and then the in-between of the policies. And it's those policies that hold us together as a group. But when we get into this sort of magical thinking that only a Zen teacher can discern what is and what is not upright behavior, then it discounts our society, it discounts growth together as humans and the ability to make mistakes. And it also discounts the wisdom of the whole community. When we are in relationship and understand ethics as the rules or the law at the base, the policies holding us together, and the precepts as our aspiration, then you can see a more dynamic way of engaging with ethics. When we assign all of our power to decide this to a teacher, this can encourage adult Zen practitioners, you know, with all of our different experience in life and professional background, perhaps, and just, you know, age experience as we move through life. This can discount all of that, or at least, or maybe some of that. So when we do that and we assign all of the power up to a teacher, then that also discounts our own perspective. And what happens is we start to suppress that gut feeling where we know something's not quite right and turn it back in on ourselves. So sometimes when we see unethical behavior and we know, you know, not just within Zen world, but within society, that this is not okay, then we start to think there's something wrong with us. And this leads to shame, which really, you know, diminishes our own perspective. And the more we get stuck in that cycle, the less we trust our own sense of ethics. So we have to come back into a relational engagement with ethics, you know, with the laws of our society at the base, again, as Carol talked about last time. Our policies, both our temple or Zen center's policies and the SCBA's policies as our, you know, the dynamic relationship in the middle, and the precepts as our guide. So no one person has the ability to decide all of that for us. We have to engage together, you know, as a relationship. And it's this ethics is how we behave when we decide we belong to each other. That Cedar mentioned in the beginning, that beautiful quotation by Brother David Stindl-Ross, that is the dynamic action of this. Once we decide that we belong to each other, you know, that we don't belong to the teacher, but the teacher also belongs to us, then we can have a more interactive dynamic.
And also the feeling of belonging together is something you feel in your body. And I want to really flag what Tenku said about, we usually do know when, without consulting a code of ethics, we usually know when something feels right or not. If we're deep down inside and not feeling defensive or attached to never making a mistake.
They say where our intuition is right a large percentage of the time, and we have to counter for bias.
Yes, and sometimes we won't feel it, and we need to consult other people and get feedback. That's right. Relationships are messy.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That was a wonderful answer, Tenku. So we want to move on to question or concern number 2. And that is the idea, the belief, the thought that some people have that Zen priests should be able to make their own decisions about dating, marrying their students, or having their spouse as a student. So that's a pretty juicy one. And I want to start talking about that. It's a tender thing. I'm going to start talking about that with a little personal example, which actually is current for me. And that is that I have a client who is a spiritual teacher, nothing to do with Zen. No one would ever, you would never know this person, who misused power and got romantically involved with a student. So I've been doing some very deep work with him, as psychotherapists do, and as you do as teachers with your students. It's very personal, it's very deep, and it's very tender. And that's a kind of agape relationship, which can often be part of a really powerful student-teacher, psychotherapist, client relationship, but it is so easily confused with sexual attraction or romantic attraction. So easily confused. So I'm working with this client and I notice a pretty strong attraction to this client of mine. And I notice it, and then I need to start looking out for other things I have to watch out for. Like, am I fantasizing about him? Am I imagining getting together, and this is just by Zoom, getting together in person? Am I thinking, oh, what it would be like to be with him? And tracking how strong that is. Now, in my noticing that, partly because I know enough about the agape relationship and know how confusing it is, I see, no, I'm really not fantasizing about it. I'm not overly looking forward to seeing him. It seems like just something I have noticed and put in my background, because I'm certain I absolutely am not going to make such a mistake. So I really know the confusion, and I also know that I'm capable of withdrawing my sexual attraction. I have control about that. I can do that. Once I know that this is happening and it could turn into a problem. So that's one reason why it's not a good idea for Zen priests to date, marry, or even have their spouse as a student. That's one reason. I'm going to name a couple of others, and then we'll have a few minutes for response. There's a lot of importance in owning the responsibilities that go with the up power role. We haven't named many of these before, but you will also have a handout that Anna will put in the chat that you can download, which will have lots more information. But in brief, a couple of them that are particularly applicable to whether priests and teachers should have sexual relationships or romantic relationships with students. One is that one responsibility is to maintain appropriate boundaries: emotional, physical, sexual, and environmental. That's your job. And I call it 150% responsible. That means that in your role as a teacher, both you and your student are 100% responsible for maintaining the health and the proper boundaries, but you are more responsible. It's not exactly 50% more, but it's enough more that it is you that has to be in charge here. And it's one of your responsibilities to earn, not just assume, your students' trust. They are being vulnerable in allowing themselves to be a student of yours. You're assessing how they're doing, and they need to trust that you will hold all your responsibilities, and especially the boundaries. You're responsible for getting your personal, normal, personal, romantic, sexual needs met, but met elsewhere, not through your role. It's so easy to confuse those two and confuse romantic with agape relationships and go off track. You need to understand the vulnerability of the student to being taken advantage of by you in an up-power role. They want you to like them. They would love to be singled out and noted as special in a spiritual way. That would feel good. And that is not the same thing as becoming romantically involved. And students can confuse that too, not just teachers. More reason for the teacher to be more responsible. And another reason is you need to appreciate the extra amount of influence you have. So you're saying to a student, you're really special, has way more influence than their friend saying that to them. Has huge influence. And you're involved in having to make objective assessments. How can you make an assessment about the progress of your husband or your wife or your partner or somebody you're romantically involved with? Another reason, which we don't often think about, is that when one person is special, especially when it becomes a secret, the entire group is hurt and harmed by that. Through jealousy, through not understanding the secret, through feeling left out. It becomes a huge group problem, as I'm sure you have experienced or know of the experience of. And the other is something I mentioned before, which is how inadequate feedback skews the relationship. So you think something is true about you that is not. So given all this, a meaningful yes to a sexual or romantic relationship is really not possible. A verbal yes can happen, an emotional yes can happen, but it's a meaningful yes is not possible. So, enough words from me. Let's hear your responses to that. Yes. Daishin says, it seems unlikely that what starts as a up power, down power relationship could turn into an equal power relationship. Unlikely. I've seen it has happened very, very occasionally, but only through having very serious psychotherapeutic help to manage that. So I'm not saying that as, oh, well, maybe. I'm saying that as it's not, we can't say never. Tenku, would you like to add to that?
What do you think, Cedar, about doing sort of a lightning round with the poll and
Yeah,
very quickly and
Yeah.
See what people have, see where they are on this. What about romantic entanglements between peers and nearly peer Sangha members? Or Soto said, avoid teaching in my study group because of the pot. Yes, exactly. You can start to get into the stickiness of all of this.
You want to respond to those?
And then if romance is so important, the two people involved should be willing to give up the spiritual student-teacher relationship. And if they're not willing, then they're romantically involved with their roles, not with each other. That is a really nice way of putting it.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I think that answers it really. You know, I don't know what else I have to add. Yeah, you mentioned the potential for harm, not just to the individual, but to the group. You mentioned how hard it is to shift out of role and up power, down power role. And then also potential for spiritual harm, which is enormous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's an important addition.
Spiritual harm seems to be a particular kind of harm that cuts very deeply. Mm-hmm. And when the teacher is holding that potential, we have to be especially careful.
So that's why the document says it is not okay.
Yeah. And there is a process. If somebody is becoming somebody attracted to their student and vice versa, and wants to know if that's a viable relationship, there's a process for addressing that. So it's not just to shut it out entirely and say this never happened, you know, la 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 la. It's to give people a chance to explore that from an upright point of view with help. So if you find yourself going into that direction, rather than the tendency to hide and go into secret, we're trying to encourage people to come into community and to accept the help of the entire community.
Right, good.
Do you want to do any of the poll, Cedar? Or?
So I'm looking at the time and I know we have 3 questions to go, but I really want to do the poll. So let's go for it.
Anna, are you ready?
I'm ready. Just let me know which ones to launch.
There are a few questions that came up. So is this okay or not okay? Number 1, going out for a drink with a student. Teachers going out for a drink with a student. So the poll should pop up. You can answer. Just choose one. We're at about 75, 78%. If you haven't answered, go ahead and answer. So it's interesting. We have some people feel that's okay. Some people feel that that is absolutely not okay, and some aren't sure. And I would hope this is where we would be, because this is a complicated issue. So I'm going to add another layer to this. And I'm not sure if it's part of the poll, but it would be a question for Cedar. What about going out for a drink with a student alone to the point of being drunk?
Yeah. Is that a poll question?
Anything for any of you who put okay? I see some shaking head and yeah, some never okay.
Seems like that's pretty clear. That wouldn't be ethical.
Yeah. Okay, let's try another poll.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Receiving a massage from your student. Okay, not okay, or not sure. It's hard. You know, this is sort of a traditional Zen thing. It's to receive body work from some of our Sangha, but that really belongs in Asia.
And especially when, as the massagee, you're naked.
I know, add the extra full body massage. requires undressing, requires a privacy of shutting the door. So I think people were a little more clear on this one.
Soto says, I did it once and it didn't work because I was too anxious.
Yeah, well, there's your barometer right there. It doesn't, if your gut says it's not okay, then you can pay attention to that.
Even though it was closed.
Yeah.
Very important.
Sure.
So here's another one that it's an interesting situation. An 82-year-old teacher who has some health issues. Clothes on, one body part. That's kind of getting a little closer to being okay. Maybe not in a completely private setting. So maybe it's your hand and the person's a professional body worker. Yeah. So let's try another poll. Just like getting your brains thinking a little bit. How about this one? Diagnosing the mental health of a student and sharing that information with others and teachers. Meaning a student comes to you, you suspect they have some mental health issues, you decide what those are. I think this person has bipolar disorder, and then you share that with your colleagues. Is that okay? So we're seeing some not okay, some not sure. So let's do some clarifying questions. I see a never okay in the comment. Cedar, what if I'm a mental health provider and my Zen student, to me, seems like they have a very clear narcissistic personality disorder. What would be wrong with me diagnosing that for them and telling others? Don't I want to warn others?
It is not your job because you're not a psychotherapist to this person. And there's also confidentiality.
So I'm not their therapist, even though I am a therapist.
Yes.
Well, what if I am their therapist as well as their Zen teacher?
Well, that's an interesting issue about whether that's okay.
Right. When you pull one string, sometimes it starts to become a little more clear.
Yeah. Okay, so in these, when you're not sure, that's a great time to talk to somebody else and get feedback from them and figure it out. So when you're in the not sure place, really, that's a good time to check. I think you had a few more, Tenku, but in the end.
But we're close on time. So as much as you want to do one more?
No.
Yeah, we're out of time for that.
Yeah. Thank you for preparing those. And the purpose of that is to get you to start thinking situationally, ordinary, everyday situations about what is, how to begin making ethical decisions on the spot and deciding which ones you have to talk with somebody else about. It's not like ethical decisions are made, in extreme situations. We make them all the time. And it's nice to know that we're doing it every day. Okay, so let's go on to concern number 3, which is an opinion that people should not question or hold accountable those with Dharma transmission, especially not lay people and novice priests. So, we've attended to some of this already in our wide-ranging discussion, but I would say several reasons. Wearing the robe, which is role power, is a responsibility to others, not a reward. A second reason is power has a shadow and an effect on your brain. Believe it or not, the more power you have, the more your brain changes so that you become more self-centered and more impulsive. You tend to have a sense of immunity. For example, Rules are for others, and you're above the rules. As you listen to these, you can probably recognize situations that have actually happened. And because of inadequate, authentic feedback, you have less ability to accurately assess yourself, your student, and your situation. And also, that includes not noticing and being able to acknowledge your limitations. Transmission, as Tenku says, does not mean you are now wise in every area. And part of being a good leader is humility to know where your limitations are and get support. Okay, moving right along here. Does that make sense? Why that belief is not accurate? Okay, you see Mike.
Yeah. And we're coming up against time. Cedar.
I know. So I'm just going to quickly name 4 and 5. And I know you like to end at 5 of the half hour, but we're going to go to the half hour.
Okay.
So a belief in cases in which teachers' own board would be blind or unable to see the teacher's unethical behavior are very rare. In actuality, that is not rare at all. And studies show that because there's a natural tendency to protect, believe, favor those we are close to. And because of the brain changes I just talked about, that makes it harder to accurately assess. Okay, those 2 reasons. There probably are more, but keep that in mind. It's not rare at all. And the 5th, documents should be very simple with lots of room for flexibility of interpretation. And Tenku addressed that earlier, saying if things are too vague, who is it that will make the interpretations? Guess who? The up-power people. Is that fair? Not really. And the importance of earning, not assuming trust, as I mentioned, and if the guidelines are really clear, then it's helpful to the down power people so that they can help watchdog for misuses of power not happening. And of course, always intention and impact affects our decision making, and we have to make sure those match up. So reasons why number 5, the documents need to not be too vague and not too flexible. Okay, we covered a lot here. Take a breath. Thank you for your dedicated presence. I hope that this was both rich and helpful personally and professionally. And I appreciate the time spent with you.
Thank you so much, Cedar. I'm hoping that this just piqued your interest. There's so much more to learn here. If you'd like to visit rightuseofpower.org, you can find a website that will lead you to more trainings online as well as in person. You could have your own temple or Zen center invite someone to do a training just for you, just for maybe the board of directors and then through the whole community. And really take these questions that didn't have clear answers for you and wrestle with them. This is what's so juicy and wonderful about working with ethics, is it's really hard to find black and white. The more we wrestle with it, the more we learn. So,
and the more we don't keep ethics secret, but talk with each other about things that come up, the better, healthier your organization will be. Talk with each other about these things.
okay.
Thanks, everyone. We'll follow up with a recording and these resources soon, and we hope to see you on July 24th at the same time for our next session. Bye-bye.